Hand spinning wool and other fibers to make yarn has been going on around the world for thousands of years. Even though hand spinning is no longer a necessity today, as it was in the past, many contemporary craftspeople enjoy the process in order to make unique and beautiful yarns for their knitted, woven, and crocheted projects. And some spinners even dye their own yarns to obtain even more specialized yarn. A drop spindle provides the most basic tool on which to spin. Or one can use a supported spindle, or a Navajo spindle. Spinning wheels, such as this spindle-type wheel, make the process quicker and more consistent. Flyer wheels are perhaps the most common wheel today and come in a variety of sizes, shapes, and styles. Sheep also come in a variety of sizes and shapes and provide us with the wool fiber we need for hand spinning. Some are more suitable for hand spinning than others, and we'll talk more about that later. Of course, we cannot spin from the sheep's back, so the fleece is removed by the shearing process once or twice a year. Hand spinners look for a clean, medium-length fiber, and this Romney fleece would be perfect for spinning. The process does not harm the sheep. However, young lambs often don't recognize their brothers or sisters without their wool coats. Understanding our fibers and our wheels can be the key to enjoyable hand spinning. Hello, I'm Patsy Zavostowski, and I will be your hand spinning teacher today on this video. And we'll be using a flyer wheel. Now there are many styles, shapes, and sizes, but they each have a treadle, which you press with your foot, and that turns the drive wheel. Around the drive wheel is a drive band that turns the flyer. The flyer is this assembly, which holds the bobbin and has a number of hooks or a sliding mechanism which allows the yarn to be wound on evenly. There's also a hole or an orifice which traps the yarn through the flyer so that every time the flyer goes around once, the yarn is twisted. Each of the wheels have a variety of whirls which choose the speed at which you're spinning. This section will be a review if you've been spinning, if you have some experience spinning, and if you're one of my newer spinning students, I want you to watch it a couple times so that you're fully familiar with the wheel you're using. This first wheel is, like I said, a single drive flyer lead wheel. It happens to be an Ashford. You can tell because there's one drive band, and when you turn it, the flyer moves, it leads the flyer around, and the bobbin basically stands still. The way this wheel works, the spinning of the drive wheel turns the flyer, and the flyer puts a twist in the yarn, and the bobbin will basically follow or stand still at the exact same speed. But there is a break band, a very small band that goes over the back of the bobbin and is adjusted here. And that allows the bobbin to stop when I release my pull on the yarn, and then the yarn is wound on. Since there are two bands, the drive and the break, there are two adjustments. Under here is the adjustment for the drive band, and this will raise and lower the flyer, making it closer or further. And you would, while you're treadling the wheel, adjust it so it's fairly loose, almost slipping. There, you can hear it slip, and then you want to adjust it so it catches. It doesn't need to be too tight. If it's too tight, you have to treadle harder. The break band has to be adjusted with the yarn or the leader through the orifice, and you want to adjust it an eighth of a turn at a time until the yarn moves in when you move your hand toward the wheel, but at the same time you can hold it out without too great of a tug. Now there's two different types of brake bands. Usually it's a nylon brake band attached to a spring, but some people prefer a cotton brake band with a little rubber band for the spring action. It's a personal choice. If your bobbin is finished very smoothly, the cotton might give you a little bit more drag with the nap from the yarn. If your bobbin is a little rough, you may be more comfortable with the nylon brake band. In either case, there's a spring or a rubber band to take up the action of the brake when you start or stop spinning. Spinners often talk about the ratios of their spinning wheels. The ratio is simply a number that describes the difference between the size of the big wheel and the flyer. In your information on your wheel is the ratio that came with your wheel, but if you want to find it, you can easily count it yourself. If you have a yarn through the orifice, just let it wind in. Take a small, bright yarn and tie it around one end of the flyer. Then we're going to line up the flyer and the crank, or the footman, so that they're both at 12 o'clock. And I'm going to count how many times the flyer goes around as my wheel, the drive wheel, goes around one time exactly. So, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and a half. So the ratio of this wheel is 6.5 to 1. That means every time the drive wheel goes around once, the flyer goes around 6.5 times, puts in 6.5 twists. Each whirl has a different ratio number. And as a generality, the larger the whirl, the more suitable that is to spinning large or heavy yarn, or to use when you're a beginner and have a new technique for your hands to learn, because it's slower. The tinier, small whirls have a higher number and are more suited to spinning a small, fine yarn. And when you are more experienced and you can move faster on your drafting. A few other points on this wheel. One, always check that the maidens are lined up straight, and as the bobbin gets full, when it's about halfway full, the momentum of the added weight of yarn tends to keep the bobbin turning. And so you may need to adjust your take-up by 1/8 of a turn to increase the braking power of the brake band. On your single drive flyer lead wheel, first, choose the correct flyer whirl. Large for large heavy yarn, or when you're beginning or learning new techniques. Small for small fine yarn. 2, check the alignment. 3, adjust the drive band. 4, adjust the brake band. 5, remember when the bobbin is half full, tighten the brake band slightly to make it more efficient. The second type of wheel we're going to look at is a single drive bobbin lead. And this particular one I'm using today is a Louette. It has a stretch band that goes over the back of the bobbin. And you can tell that this is different because when you turn the wheel, the bobbin goes around and the flyer stands still. Now the way this wheel works when you're spinning, is the drive band pulls the bobbin around, and as long as you are holding the yarn pulls the flyer around at the exact same speed. But at this end, there's a brake strap that goes across the front of the orifice. And when you release your pull on the yarn, it actually slows down the flyer and the bobbin winds the yarn on. There's very little adjustment needed for this type of wheel because the drive band is usually stretch and goes over the back of the bobbin, and the strap across, the brake strap across the front of the flyer just needs to be loose enough so that the flyer spins easily and you can hold the yarn out of the flyer, but then when you release your pull and let the yarn move toward the wheel, there is a take-up. Now, unlike the first wheel we looked at, the flyer whirl is missing because the end of the bobbin acts like a flyer whirl. In fact, that determines the speed of your flyer. Again, a large whirl is good for spinning large, heavy yarn because it will give you a low number of twists per treadle. A small whirl is good for spinning a small, fine yarn because it will give you a higher number of twists. When you want to change, you simply remove the drive band, remove the brake strap. You would lift the whole flyer off and then remove the bobbin and turn it around. But stay with the slow end, the large end, as we're beginning to give your hands time to learn the new techniques. You can also count the ratio on this wheel, but it's easier if your bobbin is empty. So I'm going to pull the yarn off. But make sure that my leader goes through the orifice. Since the flyer will stand still if it's not attached. Okay, I'm going to line up the top of the footman, and in this case, it's a sealed ball bearing. And I'm going to line up my flyer. Have my yarn around here again, so I know which one to count. Okay. There we go. 1. Hold the leader very tight so the flyer has to turn. 2, 3, 4, 5, 5.5. 5.5 to 7 is a good range for beginning spinning. To review for the single drive bobbin lead wheel, first, choose a large bobbin end for large, heavy yarn, or choose a small bobbin end for small, fine yarn. Second, choose a thick core bobbin for very fine yarns. And third, adjust the brake strap lightly. The third type of wheel we'll talk about is probably the easiest to distinguish. It's called a double drive because it looks like there's 2 drive bands. In reality, it's one drive band that's been twisted into a figure 8 and then folded so that it goes around the wheel twice. One time it goes around a whirl that's attached to the flyer, and then the second time it goes around the end of the bobbin. This causes this wheel, when you're spinning, to turn both the flyer and the bobbin simultaneously. Now you'll notice that, and I'll use this one off of an Ashford because it's a little easier to handle, that the flyer whirl is fastened sometimes with a screw on assembly or a square peg assembly onto the flyer, and the bobbin is free to turn in between. And this must be nice and tight so that there's no slippage of the flyer from the flyer whirl, but the bobbin is free. You will notice that the bobbin whirl is always smaller than either of the flyer whirls if you have a choice. And this causes the flyer to go around a slower number of times and the bobbin to go around a faster number of times. You can see this action now as I spin the wheel. The bobbin turns very fast, and when I release the yarn, it winds it on. Again, the bobbin slips if I hold the yarn out. There's only one adjustment knob, since in reality there's only one drive band, and that's right here at the front. And this moves the entire mother of all further away or nearer to the wheel. And you want to adjust it so it's fairly loose. And when you spin the wheel, the yarn goes in when you release it, or you can hold it out while the wheel is still turning. Now, one thing you'll notice on this wheel, since it's a twisted drive band, is that the drive band will always be crossed at one point. When you're spinning clockwise, the drive band is crossed way down underneath or to the left of the flyer assembly. And when you spin in the counterclockwise direction, the cross moves up here and it will be crossed to the right or above the flyer. And it's supposed to be crossed, so don't be worried about that. You do want the one that goes underneath to be the one on the bobbin, and that will reduce any friction or rubbing by the two drive bands. Now, this older wheel only has one speed choice for the flyer whirl, but many of your newer wheels have several choices. And again, you will choose the large one for spinning large, heavy yarn, and the smaller one for spinning small, finer yarn. The reason you choose it on the double drive wheel is that when there's a large difference between the size of the bobbin and the drive whirl, there will be a large take-up because the bobbin will be going around quite a bit faster, almost twice as fast as the flyer. When you move to the small end of the drive whirl, then the bobbin will go only slightly faster, and this will give you less take-up, which is appropriate for spinning a fine yarn. To review for double drive wheels, first, choose a large difference between drive and bobbin whirls to spin a large, heavy yarn. Second, choose a small difference between drive and bobbin whirls to spin a small, fine yarn. Third, adjust both drive bands with the single knob. Let's review the three types of wheels by looking at this chart. First, we talked about the single drive flyer lead wheel, where the drive band goes over the flyer. And when you turn the big wheel, the flyer moves because that's what's led around. And a small brake is on the end of the bobbin. Then we talked about the single drive bobbin lead wheel. This one has a drive band going around the end of the bobbin. So when you turn the wheel, this time the bobbin is led around. And the braking action is a small strap across the end of the flyer. And last we have the double drive wheel, which has the drive band going around both the drive whirl and the bobbin whirl. No matter which wheel you've chosen, care of your wheel is of utmost importance. You'll need to watch that the moving parts are in alignment and that all moving parts are well lubricated. Look in your manual to see all the points that the manufacturer suggests that you lubricate. You can use a good heavyweight oil like a 30 weight for any parts where there are wood or leather, because the oil will be absorbed by the wood and the leather. Other places on the newer wheels today have hard nylon parts, and those benefit by using a powder like a powdered Teflon, because the oil is not absorbed by the hard nylon. Powdered Teflon is available in the hobby stores where small trains are sold. Now, we're almost ready to spin. We've spent a lot of time understanding the wheel, but there's two critical things for my beginning spinners, and that is to be able to be comfortable treadling. Because when we finally get to spinning, it's a bit like tapping your foot, rubbing your stomach, and patting your head, all at the same time. So I want my beginners to practice treadling slowly in the clockwise direction. You need to practice this so that your leg and your foot will know what to do without having to consciously think of it. If you need to give an assist with your hand to the wheel, always turn on a spoke, not on top of the wheel where you might knock the drive band off. But sit and practice treadling, practice doing it while you're reading, while you watch the rest of the video for the first time. And remember, everybody learns at a different rate. It took me fully 3 weeks to trust my foot when I was treadling. So be patient and give yourself time to learn if you have a little trouble. If we're ready to start, the first thing we need to do is put a leader on our new bobbin. I chose a leader about the size of a spaghetti, a dry piece, because that's the size I'm going to spin to. And it's best if your leader is about the same size as the yarn you're planning to spin. You want to tie it onto the bobbin tightly. Some people tape it so it doesn't slip. You want to thread it across all your hooks. And you'll use this extra little hook that came with the wheel to pull it through the orifice on the same side that you went around the hooks. Don't let it cross by going on this side. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, we've got the leader attached. Now, to make it easy for joining on, I'm going to fold a loop and tie it with an overhand knot for use later. And then we're going to check the take-up. Every time you switch a bobbin or move your wheel, check that there's a gentle pull when you release the yarn toward the wheel, but that you can hold it out when you need to while you're drafting yarn. Now I think we're really ready to learn to spin. There's a great variety of fibers that we can spin, both commercially prepared and grease fleece from the farm. We'll start with commercially prepared. And on this table, I have the 4 forms that you can buy. First, I have a bat, which is a large, wide form that has been through the drum carder 1 time. Second, it is reduced, pulled into a narrow roving to create this roving form. This lines up most of the fibers, but there's still some short fibers and some noils mixed in with it, and it's still a little haphazard in arrangement. Third, we have sliver or top, and the roving has been through a combing machine which pulls all the fibers almost completely parallel and removes the short fibers and any little noils or tangles. The last step that the wool goes through before it hits the machinery to spin is the pencil roving. And here it has been reduced to a very small size, about the size of a pencil, and a little twist has been put into it, and it's ready for the machinery to spin. In fact, you can knit with this just as it is. When I choose to spin, I usually spin from a bat, or the roving, or the top or the sliver. And first I'm going to start with the roving. So let's look at this. The first thing I do with any new fiber is I check the fiber length, because that gives me the information I need to know how my hands are going to be, how close my hands are going to be. And so I'm going to pull out just a few fibers at a time to get a sense of how long these fibers are. And they appear to be, between 4 and 6 inches. So it's a variety. So my hands are going to be working, between 3 and 6 inches apart. Now remember I said there were 2 things you really needed to learn. The first one was treadling. The second one is drafting. Drafting is what your hands do while your foot runs the wheel. Drafting is when you choose the size that the yarn is going to be, and you choose by the number of fibers you leave to be twisted together by the wheel. The easiest way is to pre-draft, and before you're even dealing with the wheel. And you'll be practicing the exact same hand motions without the wheel wearying you. So now I pre-draft with my left hand as my forward hand and keep my fiber in my right hand, which is my back hand. It doesn't matter which hand you use. This is a two-handed operation, and both hands have their own jobs. But you can, whichever one feels comfortable, try them both if you don't know. The main reason you would choose left-handed or right-handed to be forward would be if later you're going to be spinning on a spindle wheel. A spindle point wheel, like the great wheel or a charka, is set up so that the right hand turns the wheel and your fibers must be held in your left hand. For pre-drafting or drafting, the forward hand pinches and controls the twist. The back hand holds the fibers securely, but not too tightly. Pre-drafting is really important because it helps you get the feel of the fibers before you start spinning the wheel. So let's go over it again. I want you to pinch some fibers tightly in your leading hand and then pull those fibers out of the mass of wool. When you've gone about the length of the fiber, you release, come back, pinch a new set, pull more fibers out, release, pinch a new set, pull more fibers out, and you continue like this. At this point, your back hand is simply holding on to the mass of fibers tight enough that it's in control, but loose enough that the fibers can slip out while you are drafting. And the leading hand is doing the pulling. When you've drafted a little bit, let's hook it up to the wheel. Remember, we've tensioned our leader. Now, we've got the loop. We'll pull a few fibers through, fold them back on themselves, and start the wheel. Again, always use the spoke, not the top of the wheel. Now, don't do anything. Hold it out until you see the twist come and begin to twist those fibers. When you feel that the twist is moving into the new wool fibers, you're going to draft back. And this time, I'm going to slide the twist down. I'm sliding the leading hand, and the twist follows right behind. Okay, do you see my yarn curled here? That means I need more take-up. And the rhythm is treadle, draft, getting something caught here. If any time it doesn't feel like the yarn is going in, always stop your wheel, stop your foot, and see what's wrong. And here, one little fiber had looped the hook and was caught so that it couldn't wind on. Okay, back again. For one treadle, you draft, and then slide the twist down, and the twist will follow right behind you. Draft, slide the twist down, draft, slide the twist down. Each time I draft, I allow the yarn to go toward the wheel. Now, when you get to the end of your little roving here, leave a nice fluffy end. Don't spin it out to a tip, but leave it fluffy so you can join on. Now, I treat my yarn like a 2-year-old. I never let go, because if I turn loose, it tangles and twists back on itself, and all the twist runs out. So we're going to get the twist in. I'm going to wind it on here to the maiden. Okay, now we'll pre-draft a little more. This time, let's not make it quite so thin, and we'll have more work to do while we're spinning. To join on, unwind off of the maiden. And you're going to hold right at the point of twist. Let me describe this. Here you have your yarn, here's a point of twist, and here's the drafting triangle, the fibers that aren't spun yet. So right at that point of twist, you're going to lay the old and the new fibers together, and you're going to hold that while you start your wheel. Don't let anything move into the wheel yet. And as you begin, watch how the new fibers and the old fibers twist together. And when you feel they're secure, then you draft them both. And you have your new yarn started. So back to the rhythm. Draft, slide, draft, slide, draft, feed it in, slide and treadle. Draft, slide, draft, slide. This is called a fingered draft because the twist is always under the control of my leading hand. And my hands start about 3 inches apart, half the length of the fiber, move to about 5 inches apart. Here's the 5, here's the 3. Here's the 5, here's the 3. Don't get your hands too close together, or you'll feel like you're trying to break your fibers. Always feed the yarn in. Okay. Work on this one, especially my beginning students, till you feel you've got the rhythm down. Don't worry too much about the size at this point. You can aim to try and make a yarn about the size of a dry piece of spaghetti. But first you need to get the rhythm going between your foot and your hands. If you're getting too much twist, you need to slow down your foot and speed up your hands. The second drafting style I want to teach you is called the point of twist. But before I start, I want to remind you that you have to move the yarn from hook to hook to evenly space it on your bobbin. So anytime you stop, remember to move to a different hook so your bobbin will fill evenly. Now, this drafting style we're going to do without pre-drafting. If you're having trouble, continue to pre-draft, and if not, if you're ready to move on, then just start with the roving. Again, I'm going to join on, overlapping old and new. When I see the fibers twist together, then I draft them both back. Now, instead of following the twist down, or the twist following my leading hand, I'm going to let the twist run ahead. See that the point of twist is now between my hands, and my leading hand stays about 2 or 3 inches away, and the twist is pulling the fibers out of my back hand. The back hand continues to just hold the fibers securely enough that I'm in control, but allows the fibers to move and be pulled out. If it's not going into the wheel fast enough, the take-up's not strong enough, then you want to adjust the take-up knob so that the brake band is just a little tighter, but no more than 1/8 of a turn at any time, because it's very sensitive. Okay, twist between. If your yarn is getting too thin and you feel like you're out of control, you need to let more twist go and pull the yarn slower and maybe speed up your foot a little bit. If you feel like it's getting too thick, then you want to draft or pull against the yarn a little faster and slow down your foot. Now you can move to a long sweeping draw with this kind of drafting style by keeping your hand near the leading hand near the wheel and the back hand moving back. When you do this, you have to remember to open and close that leading hand so that the twist will run underneath the thumb and finger into the new yarn. If you forget to open and close your hand, the yarn will get too soft and it won't hold together. This gets to be very fast, and when you get comfortable with this, you may suddenly find that you've made your yarn too soft. And what you need to do, that means it's time to move to a faster drive whirl so that your hands and your feet work about the same speed and the wheel puts the twist in faster. When you do a long sweeping draw, another thing you need to do is always check the strength before you pass the yarn into the wheel. So while it's apart like this, check that it's strong enough and then pass it in. And you pass in a large amount of yarn at one time. So it's draft back several treadles, check the strength, pass it in. Notice that the leading hand is always opening and closing on the twist. If it gets too thin, don't back off so fast. A control yarn is made by pulling out about 12 to 15 inches of yarn, fold it in half, let it twist back on itself, and you're going to tie a knot in it. And remove it from the wool you're working with, then reach back here and let it untwist so that you can remove it from the yarn you were spinning. Now attach your attach your previous yarn to the wheel so it doesn't get away from you. And let's look at the control yarn. Will give you some information about what you were just spinning and how it will look if it was to be plied. The card we're going to make will look something like this. It's a reference card that you can keep notes on and you can come back to if you like a yarn so that you can spin it again next week, next month, next year. So take one of your 3x5 cards and I'm going to just tear some little notches and wind this on here so that it stays. And then I'm going to tear 2 more notches. And you might want to release the take-up just a bit so you can wind some off. And we're going to wind some singles on here, which will help you see the size that you were spinning. Now on this side of your card, you can write down where you got your fiber, what type of drafting you were doing, if you liked it. Any other information can all go right here. And now I recommended that you have a little 6-inch piece of 1/4 dowel. I have nipped the end of it with a pair of garden shears so you can see there's just a little crack in it. This is going to be my magic counting stick. I'm going to take a magic marker and make a long, dark mark. Then I'm going to take my pencil and another one of my 3x5 cards. You may not know it, but the marks, the lines on most 3x5 cards are 1/4 inch apart. So this is going to be my ruler. And I'm going to mark off 2 inches. So starting at the end with the nip in it. Okay, there's one is right here. And one is right here. Now, when you are trying to repeat a yarn, first you need to know what size it was you were spinning. And one way to find out the size of the yarn is to wrap it around something, and when you see how many wraps fit into an inch, that gives you the diameter. Now, I always roll my yarn on, and I'm going to show you why with this piece of ribbon. If I attach the ribbon to my stick, and today it's being a little stubborn, okay, and I wind it like this. Did you see the twist come in? Watch again, more twist. Every time you wind, you create twist. You see how many twists I put into that yarn? Even if I go in the other direction, every time you wind, you create twist. So I'm going to recommend that you roll your yarn on. But we don't want to count ribbon, let's do yarn. Take your yarn, let it wind off of the bobbin, pull it through the little slot. Okay, all right. Now, holding it taut, you're going to use the first inch to get it straight to the wood. When you've got it straight and you've got the first mark right here, then you're just going to roll it up. The reason I put a nice dark mark is because my eyes keep aging with me, and it's hard for me to count them afterwards. So I just count every time the dark mark comes around. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. I use this thumb to just keep them lined up so they're not pressing against each other and they're not drifting apart. I wrap it tight enough that I can't see the dark line, and then I have to quick write the number down before I forget it. This was 20 wraps to the inch. That means this yarn that I have wrapped on here is 1/20th of an inch in diameter. To get the yarn back on the wheel, simply hold the stick between your fingers and let it unroll quickly right back onto the wheel. And this gives you the information about the size that you're currently spinning. Now I need to say, very importantly, that the size yarn that you measured only tells you what size that particular piece of yarn is. The rest of the time it's up to your fingers and your eyes to help you be consistent. So I need you to wrap some yarn that you've just spun and find out what size it is you're spinning. Then spin 3 or 4 more yards. Stop, wrap it on, roll it on again, and see what size that yarn was. Continue again. Spin 3 or 4 more yards, roll on some more. You'll find that there's a variety, a variation in your wrapping because we're not machines. When I'm spinning certain size yarns, I allow a certain amount of variation, as shown on this chart. On this size chart, you can see if you're spinning a heavy yarn, it will be less than 12 wraps per inch. And I allow it to vary 2 either way. If I'm spinning a medium-sized yarn, somewhere between 15 and 30 wraps per inch, I give myself a variation of 4. If I'm spinning a fine yarn, which would be 35 to 55 wraps per inch, I allow a variation of 8. And when I get to the very fine yarn, which would be 60 or more wraps per inch, you can allow a variation of maybe up to 12. To spin a finer yarn, there are several things you'll want to do. First, we're going to move to a faster drive whirl. So that means you're going to have to slide it down and tighten up the drive band till it looks about right, and then check it by feel. If you're on a double drive wheel, you'll want to go to the smaller whirl so that you have a small difference between drive whirl and bobbin whirl. And you want to, on the single drives, release the take-up just a little bit. The double drive releases the take-up for you when you make the switch from the large whirl to the small one. For spinning fine, I'm going to choose our sliver top. And the first thing I'm going to do is check the size, check the length. And here you can see this is fairly long fiber, most of it about 6 or 8 inches long. So this tells me that my hands will work a little further apart than before. I'm going to make sure that I have a fuzzy end here for joining on. In fact, I'm going to untwist a little bit more so that anytime you switch fibers or preparations, it's a little harder to join on than in the same preparation. Hold the fibers, hold the yarn out until you see the connection. You see the new fibers start to twist. Okay. And for a fine yarn, I'm going to go back to my fingered twist. And I'm going to keep reducing the number of fibers that are in the drafting zone until I get down as fine as I choose. Now, when you've gotten comfortable spinning one size yarn, it's a good thing to challenge yourself to see if you can spin about half as thick. Remember, when you pull the fibers apart in the drafting, that you've got the twist under control, and you're not going to pull all the way apart, though you could if you chose to. But you're just going to slide the twist into it when you've got that very fine number of fibers ready to be spun. Now, the finer yarn you spin, more twists can be inserted. And so you actually have a lot more time for your hands to work. Okay, let's look at a control yarn of this one. I'll pull some out, fold it on itself, and let it twist up. Quite a difference. I'm going to tie that off. Again, pull it out from the leader, let it unspin. So when I start up again, I'll have a fuzzy end. This is a longer fiber, and so I may have to let even more untwist so I don't break the fibers. There we go. Now for comparison. You see the difference between this and my big pink yarn and my little white yarn? A lot more twist and a lot finer spun. What if you want to spin thicker? Actually, that's harder than spinning finer. And it will help if you do a little pre-drafting. But don't take it down too narrow. Now remember, this is very long fiber that I'm working with. And you see how much further apart my hands are? So I've pre-drafted, but I've left a lot of fiber together. Then I'm going to change the drive speed back to very slow and reduce it so it's not so tight. I'm going to increase the take-up because the heavier the yarn is, the less twist it needs to hold it together, and the easier it is to get over twist. So you need a fairly strong take-up to get the yarn into the wheel quickly. We're going to get our join on here. Now you can't go from very fine to very thick in one big jump. You have to do it in increments. So I'm going to go up slowly, get thicker. When I'm spinning thick, I'm treadling very slow. In fact, I use my heel to push the treadle up so that it doesn't reverse on me. And I'm drafting, look at that, maybe almost 3 inches for a treadle. And I'm letting the yarn go right into the wheel. And thick yarn is much harder than thin. So make sure you're comfortable with your treadling and your hand motions before you try to spin thick. You will need to release the back hand so that you always have plenty of fiber being twisted together. Now, if I make a control yarn of this, you'll see that it is very thick. Release it from here. Release the twist. Secure the end. So whether you're spinning thick, thin, or in between, there's a definite correlation between the whirl you're working on, the speed of your feet, and the speed of your hands. Lastly, I want to work on spinning a slub yarn. Now my beginners may be very surprised because I know that they have been working to avoid a slubby yarn. But as you get older, or I shouldn't say older, as you get more experienced, you may want to be able to spin that textured yarn that you were spinning as in your early spinning days. And one way to do that is by the type of preparation. Your bat is a good preparation for that. So it gives you lots of fiber to work with. It's not carded, it's not even. And so let's use this gray. Let's begin to join on. Watch the twist, pull the gray into the white. I'm going to keep it on a slow speed because of the handwork. And what I'm going to do, I'm pinching a large amount of fiber, and then I'm drafting so that it's thin. Watch again. Pinch a large amount, draft further than you should, and you'll have a thin space, and the twist will jump over the thick. Thick, draft more than you should, and let the twist run over, and you get your slub. You can do this at regular intervals. And you'll have a textured yarn. Here, I'll show you that on a control. Oh, this was very softly spun, and I'm not happy with the way it looks. Let's try this, put a little more twist in it. Okay, draft what's too thin, let the twist run in, pull a thick part, draft what's too thin, let the twist run in, okay. Now let's try it again. There we go. And here you have a yarn that goes from thick to thin to thick to thin. A slub yarn. Up to this point, we've been working with a variety of commercially prepared fibers. Now I want to address the special needs to work with a grease fleece that you maybe got from a ranch or a store. Two terms that you'll hear are woolen and worsted. These terms used to designate specifically how a yarn was created. Today, the terms are often used loosely to describe a size, as in, I want to buy a knitting worsted. I'm going to show you exactly how to make a woolen yarn and a worsted yarn. But I want you to remember that today, most of our spinning is mix and match. And you may take some of the steps from the worsted and some of the steps from the woolen to create a yarn of your own. Here are some of the differences between worsted and woolen. One is hard, the other is soft. One yarn is smooth, the other fuzzy. One yarn should be lustrous, and the other one matte. One should be good for weaving, and the second one for knitting. To create such different yarns, several choices need to be made to enhance the differences. When you're making a worsted, you'll be looking for long, wavy, lustrous fiber. You need to comb it. Your draft will be fingered. It's usually very firmly spun and hard set twist. The opposite, when you're making a woolen yarn, is to choose short, crimpy, matte fibers, card them on hand cards, use a long double drafting style with softly spun twist, and when it's washed, you leave it stretchy. Let me show you these two yarns as examples of woolen and worsted. They are both 2 ounces. They're both about the same size because they have the same yardage, but they're very different yarns. This gray one is softly spun and left airy and full. The white one is spun smooth and hard and firm, and all the air has been compressed out as the twist went in. The gray one should make you think of knitting. It's very soft and springy. In fact, this little tam was knit out of this very yarn. The white one would make a lovely blanket, smooth and show off a fancy weave because it is such a smooth yarn, and it's good for weaving. Let's start with making a worsted yarn. Now the first thing we wanted was a fleece that had long, wavy crimp. If you look at this fleece here on the table, it's from a border Leicester sheep. It has a pretty good wave to the crimp. It's not a real long and it's not real short, but it's got a nice kind of wavy, curly crimp. When you begin to look for fleece, look at the overall effect, because in each fleece you may find some little tiny crimpy wool that came from the neck. In fact, if you buy a whole fleece and lay it out at home, you'll probably need a full-size bed sheet to lay it out on. And when you unroll it, it'll kind of fall into this type of shape. In the middle will be the back and the sides. The legs will fall out to each of the corners, and at one end will be the tail. That'll be quite dirty, and the other end will be the neck, and that'll be very fine, crimpy, and maybe a lot of alfalfa caught in the wool. A good fleece will have been skirted by the rancher, and that means he took off the outside 2 or 3 inches because there was a lot of contamination on the fibers, and he discards them for you. If he doesn't skirt the fleece for you, you'll need to do the skirting, and you'll be throwing away fleece that you just paid for. When you look at your wool, you're going to sort it into fibers that look alike. Usually, the side sections here are your best wool. The back is sometimes matted because that's where the sheep has been rained on if it's been outside and grew up in a rainy country. And the leg wool back here will be fairly coarse, and the neck wool will be fairly fine. So you'll look at your fleece, and you'll sort into different types of fiber. Here's a really tiny neck, and here's from the back, and this is what we want. To preserve the lock so I can comb the fiber later, I like to wash it like this in little bundles. Let me open one, and you can see how I've made it. I use a piece of nylon net. I've laid the locks out on it, fold the net over, and roll it up. Use a rubber band to secure it, and wash it in hot, soapy water. And when I wash it, basically it's a soaking wash. I rinse it again in very hot water. If it's dirty, I'll wash it twice. I like to use dish detergent or shampoo when I wash my wool. And when I'm finished, it looks like this. And I can unwrap it, and the locks are all laid out, ready to be combed. Now, wool combs come in many different varieties. There's large, sharp English combs, kind of medium-sized Viking combs, and modern day combs that are a cross between the two. The combs I like are small, easy to hold in your hand. These are made by Louette, and they're used two at a time. To start, you're going to take a couple of locks and lash them on to the comb. These are small, so you can't put a great amount on it. And the main key is when you're combing, the teeth stay at right angles to each other. So if I have the stationary comb laying sideways, I can comb up, or I could comb down with my moving comb. If I have the stationary comb pointing up, I can comb toward me, or I can comb away from me. It's your choice, whatever feels comfortable. You want to comb it like a young girl's hair, so that you start at the ends and work your way through, taking a little bit more fiber each time. If you had a lot of second cuts in the fleece that you bought, they'll be left behind. So you'll clean off the stationary comb, and then we're going to reverse the process. So you either turn the combs or change the direction of your combing. And we're going to put the wool back on the stationary comb. This will help remove the debris, if there was any small seeds in there, but some of those you'll have to take out by hand. Now, it looks like my wool is fairly static here in the studio. So, and if you have trouble at home, what you need to do is make a small spray bottle with 1 part of a washable oil, like a baby oil or a bath oil, a body oil, and about 3 or 4 parts water. Shake it up and just mist it a bit to take down the static. Okay, that'll work much better. Now, you'll get down till you have the little rough ends and the little knots and knoils left on the comb. Again, remove those. And now you're going to draft the fibers off. It's just like we did in pre-drafting. You're going to take a few fibers and pull them out. Again, let the length of the fiber help you know how far apart to work with your hands. And you're going to make your own pencil roving or fine roving ready to spin. And these fibers will be all parallel. And just keep working. Now, some spinners actually spin straight from the comb, holding it in their back hand and drafting as it goes onto the wheel. You may enjoy that as you get better at and more used to your combs. Again, you won't be able to take it all off the comb, and you'll have this nice little fiber roving ready to spin. Now, let me pull my wheel back around here. I'm going to check the tension and move to a different hook. Anytime you stop, particularly if you have kids in your house, check your tension, check your hooks, because someone may have been playing with your wheel while you were away. I'm going to join on. And to make this worsted yarn, remember we want to remove the air. So we compress it and use the fingered draft that you already learned. That was the worsted drafting style. We draft it out, slide the twist down. Go right back to what you learned before. And you'll get your smooth, lustrous yarn. Let me stop here and make a control yarn so you can see how it's looking. Because usually the worsted yarn is better with a harder twist. And I'll show you how to put more twist into it if that's your choice. Then we can compare the two. Okay, now when you're joining on for worsted, it takes quite a long join because your fibers are so parallel. And you're usually working with a fairly long fiber. So watch that the twist begins to catch the new fibers. Then you want to draft old and new together and slide the twist down. Now I'm going to intentionally speed up my foot and slow down my hands so that I get harder twist. I'm keeping a pretty strong control with my leading hand to keep the twist from running ahead. Sometimes you even have to do what's called back rolling, and that is you roll the twist down with your thumb right before you start drafting. That helps remove that last little bit of twist. You always roll the twist toward the wheel. Okay, let's compare this one. That's what we did first. Sometimes your fibers will fight you. Okay. This was well twisted. There we go. And you see the difference in the twist here. The harder twist one here and the softer twist. They're both acceptable, and depending on the project I want to make, I might choose to spin harder twist and I might choose to spin a softer twist. Now another style that you might want to do while you've got your locks is to comb them with a dog comb and spin over your finger. Get my comb. And you just pull one lock, hold it by the back. I'm going to comb out the tip. Again, spray it if it feels too staticky, but I think I can deal with this because it's one lock at a time. Comb the back. Okay. It looks fluffy on both ends. I'm going to lay it over my finger. If you've been having trouble dealing with a longer fiber, when you spin over your fingertip, that shortens the fiber by half. And for many people, makes it easier to have the control you want. And it allows you to work with your hands closer together. I'm going to lay the leader across my fingertip, under my thumb. Start spinning. Don't let it go in again until you feel the new fibers are caught. And then when you draft, the spinning triangle stays around your fingertip. And you can slide the twist in to make it very smooth, or you can let the twist run by itself and it'll make a hairier yarn. Here I'm using the point of twist draw. Your fingers just control the ends, and you should be able to spin just about all of it right off your fingertip. Stop when you're down to a fluffy end so you can join on again. So these are two techniques you can use with many of the worsted preparations. Now I'd like to show you how to do the woolen. Now I want to talk about the things you would choose to do to get that soft woolen spun yarn, that soft, fuzzy, matte yarn. First, you might choose a different fleece, like this one here. You notice how it has a fine crimp on all the locks. Again, look for a clean fleece that has very little vegetable matter. Here's one small leaf. But vegetable matter has to be picked out, so the cleaner the better. When I wash it, I don't worry about keeping it in locks, so I often use like a net bag that oranges or apples came in. Again, I wash it in hot soapy water, squeeze just a bit, lift it out, and rinse it in hot water, and then let it dry. When it's dry, we'll card it. Take the wool out. And if it's dry and staticky where you are, again, you might want to give it a little oil and water spray. For woolen yarn, we want a rolled up preparation so that the fibers can push sideways against the yarn. And for this, my hand cards work best. There are many ways to card yarn, and I use what I call a nibble method, and that's what I'll show you today. I charge my cards, that is, I put the wool on it lightly, stretching the wool through the teeth. This teases it for me while I'm doing it. And then I start by brushing the lower ends, and then I put the teeth together and actually nibble my way up, making the fibers pull through the teeth. This transfers all the wool to the moving card. And leaves my stationary card clean. I turn it over to doff it, just laying it lightly on top, and then roll it up. And transfer it to the back to continue rolling it. Now my cards are curved. If you don't have curved cards, you can just roll it in your hands. This is a very different preparation than the combed because the fibers are going in many directions. So with a soft twist, they'll still be able to push out and give us that lofty, soft yarn we're looking for. The drafting style I'm going to show you is similar to the point of twist draft that we learned earlier, but this time I'm also going to show you what I call a double draft. Some people call it a long draw, and there'll actually be more than one point of twist as the yarn is being formed. This is a very fast way to spin a soft yarn. At first it looks a little complicated to learn, and you may have to break it down into little steps and stop your wheel so you can see what's happening. Join on as before. Wait till you see the twist catch the new fibers, and then draft old and new. When you feel you've got a secure join, you're going to draft back faster with the back hand and make a very soft yarn, way too soft, and pinch the twist with the front hand. It'll look like this. I release the twist, draft back, and you can see that this yarn is way too soft. My back hand has reached over and pinched the end of the yarn so that the twist can't get into the fiber supply. And my front hand is holding the twist tightly until I'm ready to release a bit and pull. And saw it draft down, release a bit more, and pull, release a bit more, until it settles at the proper size. And you would do this with the wheel spinning when you're good at it. And always check that it's strong enough, and then pass it in. Let me do it again, a little faster. I'm going to draft back, both hands pinch. Let a little more twist, a little more, a little more, a little more. And you see it, the twist settling, then put in enough twist to make it a secure yarn. Pass it in. Sometimes the twist runs in quite fast, and your hands have to move like ahead of a flood, it seems like. Pass it in. The twist is settling in, and you just let the twist go in enough to keep the draft down the thin parts or the thick parts, and the twist settles into the thin. Sometimes you may need to roll down one stubborn slub. Make sure it's secure and pass it in. Here's what it looks like in normal speed. Looks mostly like I'm spinning taffy. Now, if the twist has been inconsistent, you may sometimes get this problem. And there was not enough twist, and it truly drifts apart. That's part of learning the process. Break off both of the ends, let them drift apart so that you can start again and get a clean start. Let the twist join. Draft them both together, be secure. Reach forward, there we go. And you continue in that way. Now, one thing you need to check is how much twist are we getting? So I'm going to pull out and make a control yarn. And you can see here that this is a very soft yarn. I would use it as a single because there's not a lot of twist as a plied yarn. If you want more twist, you need to hold it out and add 3 or 4 more treadles. Compare now. A little more definition to the plying. Let's try it one more time. Since I'm putting twist into a long length of yarn, 3 or 4 more treadles, it takes a lot of treadles to really show up. There. Now if I was going for a plied yarn, I've got the definition that I like. So what it says to me is the speed of my hands, I need to be on a faster drive whirl because the yarn was being created too soft. Now another carding trick I want to show you is how to card and make a parallel preparation anyhow. And so we'll card again. This will not make a woolen yarn, but will make a yarn more like a worsted. Since I'm using a soft, springy fiber, it'll be about halfway between both. I card just like before, nibbling my way up, put the teeth all the way together, but then pull the fibers through the teeth. Turn the moving card over, doff it, and this time I'm going to lift my fiber and roll it sideways. And then you'll see that the fibers are all running fairly parallel, and I can pre-draft. And when I spin this, I will have a smoother yarn that won't be either exactly woolen or worsted. It'll be something kind of in between. If I finger in the draft, it'll be closer to worsted. Like I mentioned before, spinning today is mix and match. We don't need to spin just woolen or just worsted, but use the techniques from both types of yarn creation to fit the needs you want. When your fibers are laid parallel, it's easier to remove the air. When they're rolled like in a roll log, they'll push out and create a softer yarn. When I finger in the twist, it makes a smoother yarn. When I let the twist run between, it makes a fuzzier yarn. If I put a lot of twist in, it makes a harder yarn, and a soft twist makes a softer yarn. Now we're getting to the final steps of our spinning, the question of plying and finishing. Up to this point, we have been spinning singles yarn, so if they're untwisted, we have just fibers. When you ply, you take two singles and put them together. To choose and decide, I look at my control yarns that I made earlier. Over here are all my cards, and I look at the control yarn and the single that I spun. Now, if it looks like this one, the Corriedale, that I did woolen, and the control yarn is very soft with very little definition, then I know that this would be a good yarn as a single. I could even knit with it. However, if the control yarn is like this Borderleister one that I combed, with a lot of definition, you can clearly see the plies, then I know that this yarn would be better plied. Up until this point, we've been spinning Z on our wheel. Now your wheel goes in the opposite direction and you'll be spinning S. And I want to talk about this clockwise, counterclockwise question. Here we have the Z, the letter Z, and you can see that the slant on the center of the Z goes this way. And when you spin your wheel clockwise, that's the twist on the yarn. Your singles, if you looked at them close, will have all the fibers twisted with that direction. Now, if you turn the wheel in the other direction, counterclockwise, you get a twist that matches the center of the letter S, this direction. And for singles yarn, I usually spin them Z, two Z's, and then I ply them in the S direction. And this is what they'll look like. And the lines between the plies will be in the S direction. I can start and spin a single S and ply it in the Z, which would be this formula, and the ply would look like this. As a beginner, it's best to just spin Z to start with and always ply S until you're confident and consistent on your spinning. For plying, I'm going to recommend, even if you have a nice lazy Kate, that you take the bobbins and put them one on each side of you in a tub. It's a little like keeping your children from fighting in the car. There's one. There's the other one. Newly spun yarn and beginner yarn often has a lot of twist, and the yarns will snarl on each other if they're too close. The weight of the bobbin in the tub gives a little resistance that also helps keep them from snarling. Now I've tied the two yarns together, and I have an empty bobbin on my wheel with a new leader, and this time I'm going to be turning the wheel counterclockwise. And my leader is slipping on the bobbin. See, it just slides around. So I'm going to get it started winding up. For plying, you need a bit stronger take-up tension. And so turn the adjustment knob. On your double drive wheel, you will want to be on the largest drive whirl because that gives you a greater take-up. Pull the two yarns through the loop. Watch them twist. And then use the backhand to tension both yarns and then run the twist in. Then you should have enough take-up to pull it in. Run the twist in. Don't pass your yarn all the way into the wheel, but leave about 8 inches or so out so that the twist can balance. And as you're doing it, stop, and I'll stop a little early to check if you're getting enough twist. Here you can look back at your control yarn, and I think you can see that I haven't put in as much twist as my yarn wanted to do by itself. So I need to spin a little more. And now it looks like we're matching up. And you continue to tension, let the twist run in, count the number of treadles, because it'll be nice and consistent. 3, 4, 5, pass. 2, 3, 4, 5, pass. Consistency is the key in plying. Now, one thing that will probably happen one time for you while you're a beginner is that you'll be distracted, the wheel will stop and begin going in the opposite direction. If you look at the bobbin, you'll see that it has started to unwind, and in this case it's even begun to wind in the other direction and has caught around the hook so that it won't go in. So you need to keep track. Hold that out. There we go. Always keep a sharp eye on the drive wheel that when you're plying, it's going counterclockwise. Now watch, look close when you see me tension. I'm using my thumb and forefinger to tension one and 2 fingers to tension the other, but the bobbins in the tubs are also helping to give a good tension to the yarns. Let the twist run in and intentionally pass it to the wheel. The yarns are tight and even. Twist comes in, pass it to the wheel. Okay, we have some pink yarn left, let's say, and so I put the yarn on my Lazy Kate, and I'm going to make a ball of yarn with the ball winder. You can see how fast the Lazy Kate allows the bobbin to spin, and that's why I recommend beginners ply using the tub. This will be enough to show. Now, while it's on the ball winder, I'm going to tie the 2 ends together. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use one yarn from the inside of the ball and one yarn from the outside. So I'm going to slip the ball on my fingers of my back hand, get the end of the previous yarn, which I tied a loop in. After all, if you're knitting this, you'll want to stop and clean up the ends anyhow. Don't try to fake a join in plying. And then I'm going to tension with my fingers, allow the twist to run in, let it peel off, tension it, and let the twist run in. Put your wheel on a fairly slow speed so that you can see what you're doing. Tension it, and let the twist run in. And continue like this till you get to the end of the ball of yarn. And you'll actually be right in the middle. You can go on, and even start with a big ball if you want. Now another thing that you can do when you're plying is to make a 3-ply yarn from one bobbin. Let me make a new loop to join onto. What I've done is this time I put the blue yarn in a tub further back. And a 3-ply yarn will make a thicker yarn, but we can do it using just one bobbin to start with. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie it on, leaving a loop. Now, the backhand has a lot of new jobs, so watch close. It's a bit like finger crochet. The backhand, thumb and finger stay in the loop and hold on to the 3rd yarn, which is coming from the bobbin. Start your wheel. The twist will move in. Then you're going to pull up a new loop, about 8 to 10 inches, tension it with the 3rd one, put the twist in. Pull up a new loop, thumb and finger in it. Your other fingers can hold up the 3rd yarn. Put the twist in. Pull up a new loop, thumb and finger in it, pull it, and let the twist run in. Be sure to pass it to the wheel. Now my bobbin jumped off out of the tub, but you can continue like this and make a round 3-ply yarn with just one source. I'd like to show you a chart to explain twist per inch in plied yarn. When you look at a 2-color yarn that's plied, it's easy to see how many times each ply comes over. If we imagine that this is an inch, you can see that the blue one came across 1, 2, 3 times, or the white one came across 1, 2, 3 times. Here's the same yarn, but in this one color. To find out the plying twist, just count each bump. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and divide by 2, and you get your same answer, 3. So the plying twist in both of these yarns is 3 twists per inch. Now the last step to making your yarn is to wash it and set the twist. To do this, you need to make it into a skein, and a niddy noddy is a helpful tool. Release the yarn from the front of the wheel and wind it all the way in to the flyer. And then we're going to take the end of the yarn, again, tie our little overhand loop, and put it on one arm of the niddy noddy. The other hand holds in the middle, and you probably need to relax the tension on your bobbin and begin to wind around. Now if you had kids at home, you could help them count like in olden days, and you would say, niddy noddy, 2 heads, 1 body. 'Tis 1, 'tain't 1, be 1 soon. 'Tis 2, 'tain't 2, be 2 soon. 'Tis 3, 'tain't 3, be 3 soon. 'Tis 4, 'tain't 4, be 4 soon. Of course, one extra wrap is to allow the baker's measure, the little extra bit, because in previous days a skein was 7 hanks of yarn, each one having 80 yards or 40 wraps. When you get to the end, you just loosen it from the leader. And I'm going to sit back down and tie this end in a double hitch, but not too tight, and then get some other tying yarns. And I'm going to tie it in 4 places. Not too tightly, because I don't want any of the grease or anything caught under the tie. But this will keep our yarns in order so that they don't tangle when we're washing. If I had a really big skein, I might divide the skein and crisscross through it like this so that I have a little more control. But this is a small skein. And we'll slip it off the niddy noddy. That aside. And we're ready to wash it. It's just a matter of washing it, or much like you would any fine item. Wash it in the sink, hot soapy water. And then when you pull it out, you press it in a towel, you're going to open it out, put both hands inside, and snap the skein open. And then you can hang it to dry. Now you can see how it twists up now because I haven't set the twist. This was not washed. But after it's washed, it'll hang smooth and even. I've been encouraging you along the way to keep information on file cards. Here I've begun cards on my fleece. And I have a dirty lock, a clean lock, and the yarn that I spun, plus the name of the sheep and where I got it from. Because once your yarns are finished, you can weave, knit, crochet, anything you want to do with the yarns you've created. On this table, I have some woven things. This skirt was woven from several fine spun singles. This little jacket for my son was woven from heavy spun single yarns. Over here I have knitted items. This vest for my father was knit from singles. Now many beginners have trouble knitting their singles, and that's because they put in a lot of twist, and they need to ply those yarns to balance out the twist. But if you can spin a soft yarn, like this woolen, you can knit it into a lovely smooth outfit. These are the yarns that I used in the vest that I've been wearing. And this hat is from a plied gray and white. Lastly, I want to show you a crocheted piece that I crocheted from some very fine merino. And it's been crocheted into a lace collar that I wear over a dressy blouse. Now I've given you a lot of information about spinning, and there's plenty more to learn. There are lots of books and magazines that you can refer to. There's Mabel Ross's video on spinning techniques for more advanced hand spinning. There's my video on spinning cotton, silk, and flax when you're ready to move on. So like I say, there's a world of fiber out there waiting to be spun. Have fun.